Welcome to Persons of Interest. I am your host, Derek Dockett. Earlier this year, the Springfield Cardinals announced the promotion of Matt Turer from Public Relations Coordinator to the organization's newly created position of Public Relations and Digital Media Specialist. Matt joined the team back in November of 2017, leading the social media and digital media efforts and serving as the team's public relations contact and digital marketing copywriter. In this podcast, Matt and I discuss his career path that led to the Springfield Cardinals, his experience thus far, and a little more. This is Matt Turer on Persons of Interest. Where'd you go to college? What's your degree and your background there?
I went to Ohio University in Athens, Ohio. So the Bobcats, not the Buckeyes. So I went to OU. I grew up in Clearwater, Florida. I was born in Boston, but I went to OU for their sports management program. Through middle school, I wanted to work in sports. When I was in 8th grade, I thought I was going to be a GM of a baseball team.
Nice.
And so Ohio is, long-standing, very good sports management program. So went there, but after about 2 years, which was funny, we were talking before this started about how people's paths can change, I switched to political science. I always liked politics too, so it wasn't completely random. I actually interned in DC in 2010, and I interned on a presidential campaign in 2011 and 12. But after all that, while it was fun, you're working, not that I don't work these hours now during the season, but you're working 70-hour weeks, you're eating pizza for 2 out of 3 meals every day. And by the end of that campaign, I don't think I've ever been fatter, more stressed, and more unhappy. And so I was like, what am I doing? I went here for sports. I love sports. So I stuck with poli-sci to graduate, but going out of college because of experience gained writing for the newspaper at Ohio, I ended up in sports journalism on Nantucket, Massachusetts, writing about prep sports and Cape Cod, which was great. It was fun. It's a old weekly paper, and I kind of helped them build up their digital presence. And then from there, I was hired by the Ozone. So that's how kind of how it all came full circle.
That's funny. So there are some parallels, actually. So I worked for 8 years at the Missouri Valley Conference, and I did not go for sports management or sports marketing, sports media. I have a degree in art and design, and my minor is in advertising and promotion. And I landed the job with the Missouri Valley Conference here in St. Louis and worked there for 8 years and had no idea what life was like working in sports. And it's funny, you talk about eating pizza, working so many hours and putting on the weight. Working in sports, there's some parallels there, because if you're doing event management, sometimes you're working lots of hours and you're eating whatever you can find just to eat, but then you're sitting there doing nothing, putting on the weight. So you try to figure out how to get active and, do something different. So I find that tidbit to be very funny and interesting. So
yeah, and you're right. It's not something that you totally get away from, but I think the difference is, working on those campaigns, the pizza would just show up in front of you constantly. Whereas working for a newspaper, they couldn't really afford to buy us pizza every day. And then working for the Cardinals, we get our meals during games, our employee meals, or our dinner, but there's some vegetables mixed in there. So
Sure. So it's funny, you've got the prep sports background covering for the Ozone there. I'm familiar with what they do in Springfield and Southwest Missouri. My last few podcasts have actually been with a number of folks, one here in St. Louis, a Missouri State grad that's now in Texas, that are on the prep sports beat and that are writing. They're covering stories of high school sports and things like that. And the one thing they've sort of both hit on was relationships that they've created, not only that helped them in their current jobs, but helped them going forward. You never know where you may find the next opportunity and where it may come from. Can you just touch on what relationships have meant for you and your career up to this point?
Well, I think specific to the career itself, journalism and then what I'm doing in PR and digital media for a sports team, it's all about relationships. So right now it's, you have to create relationships with the media here to sell the Cardinals and sell stories about the Cardinals, but also with the players. A lot of these guys coming up to AA, they're not as used to the same level of in-depth coverage from a team. Like, you're not really getting that as much in the Florida State League, and then certainly not in the Midwest League and below, save for maybe a handful of organizations. So creating relationships with the players does a lot of things for you. When I'm asking them to come to a story or to go to a community event, if they know me and we're friendly with each other, they're much more likely to say yes. That makes my job much easier. But then it also helps going forward. Look at a guy like Dylan Carlson, who I'm sure everyone in St. Louis knows now already, even though he hasn't played a game there. Dylan last year, he started out with us, was very friendly from the start. So he made it a lot easier. But once he went up to Memphis, and then now that he's will be a St. Louis Cardinal, hopefully not in, too far in the future, asking him for things has been a lot easier because we were close and he was close with Andrew. So asking him to, do an interview during the quarantine, take time out of his day, he said yes about a month ago. That's something that sounds simple and people would think that players are willing to do, but it's actually really hard to get these guys to do something and take some time out of their day for you. And it's not a bad thing. I get it. Their job isn't to, help me with my job 24/7. But if they like me more and respect me more, then they're more willing to do that. And then, of course, going back to journalism, that's what journalism is all about: relationships. That's how you get your stories. That's how you get your quotes. That's how you get the quotes that matter. But I think you're kind of asking, too, how those relationships have maybe helped with steps in my career. So here, I don't know that they have too much. Where I guess they have is, I remember in my third interview at Springfield was the first time I actually was interviewed by the general manager, Dan Ryder. And this was going to be Dan's first full season. Dan's been with Springfield forever, but, he took over for Matt Gifford in 2017. And then his first full year would have been 2018 as GM. And Dan asked me what Brian, his last name is escaping me right now, which is actually embarrassing, but the president of KY3, what he would say if Dan asked him, like, why should you hire Matt Turer? And he knew Brian, so he knew if I was going to be bull or not. And I gave him an honest answer, and I don't want to necessarily repeat what I said here because I don't love pumping myself up too much, but I thought Brian would give the answer that I gave, and I think Dan liked it, and I think that was a big part in me getting the position. So creating those relationships with people, and especially people that know other people, which in the sports industry everyone does when you get to this level, is extraordinarily important.
Do you ever think to yourself, like you said, you thought your dream was to be a baseball general manager, that it happened at this point in your life that you'd be, you're technically a front office staffer of a AA baseball team. That's pretty cool opportunity you've got in front of you there, and you've got a chance to sort of make a name for yourself. Obviously, I know you probably don't take that for granted, but you see it happening this soon in your life?
Yeah. Yes, I would say so. That's kind of what my expectation was for myself. I don't know that when I got out of when I left college and started out working with the Nantucket Enquirer and Mirror, that I think I would be here 5 years later. So I started the Inky Mirror in late 2014. But that's not necessarily me surprising myself that I'm with the Springfield Cardinals. It's more just of a surprise that the path changed. Because when I started in journalism, I was fully committed with staying in journalism. So the fact, if this opportunity didn't present itself in Springfield, Lord knows where I'd be right now. I might still be with, the Ozone if things had maybe worked out differently, or I might be working for a newspaper, who knows where. It's hard to say.
So what's the day-to-day like for you? Because I managed social media and did video content, things like that in a previous life. Of course, now this is weird circumstances we're in with the pandemic that we're all dealing with. But taking that out of the equation, on a normal, game day or during the season, are you? I know during the game, cranking out content, recaps, previews, all that stuff. But what do you do to make a mark on Springfield Cardinals social media?
Yeah, what do I do pre-COVID?
Yeah. Yes.
On a game day, a lot. So it's in minor league ball, pretty much everyone in minor league baseball, you're doing the job of what maybe 3 people would be doing on a game day with a major league team. And that doesn't, you're still in the minors, doesn't mean you're doing something better than a major league employee. It's just what you have to do. But not everyone does it. So what I have challenged myself to do since being here is to do everything from kind of, coming up with our overall social content strategy. But then on game days, I'm the photographer as well. So I have to pick out anywhere from 2 to 6 innings where I'm going to be down there roaming and trying to kind of capture the images and the moments that I know I'm going to want to use, not just that day, but for the coming days on social media. And I've found that to be maybe like the biggest part of what I've done in Springfield is creating a look and consistency with our photography and our videos on our socials. Because I think people recognize us now for those images, for what I think are close to some of kind of the best photos on social media in minor league baseball, which isn't just about me. It's about how close I am working with our graphic designer. And up to this past season, we had a photographer named Mark Harrell who had been taking photos pretty much on his own for Springfield for 15 years. So it's utilizing all those resources we have to make us look as good as we can. And live tweeting is just a part of it. Tweeting's fun, but our graphic designer comes up with recaps and lineups and cool and graphics and everything throughout the season, which has actually been really cool. I mean, you talked about COVID and pre-COVID, but it's one thing we've learned during all of this is things that we would have never thought to take the time to do during the season that I think we'll end up applying to some of our coverage when things get back to normal. And that stuff like, pumping out activities for kids and games for fans to play at home. I don't think you necessarily have to be stuck in your house because of the coronavirus to want to feel sort of that connection with other fans and people playing along with you online.
Totally agree. I've had some of the same experiences with my position now, and it's like, wow, this is a good time to create this piece of content. This is useful, and all of a sudden now it's like we can do this all the time. We don't have to do it just now because we don't have sports. It's like, hey, right. it applies. So it sounds like between photography, you said video, tweeting, some writing in there. Your skill set, has it evolved over time since? Have you seen it evolve over time post college now?
Gosh, so much.
What's the one thing that you've picked up that you never thought you'd be doing since college now?
Probably photography.
Really?
And yeah. Well, yes. Self-taught with help from Chris Parker, who's the founder of the Ozone with KY3, kind of gave me tips early on. And then it's something I started to get interested in with the Inquirer and Mirror. The photographer there is named Nicole Harnischfeger. She's been there for 2 decades, and she let me use her camera a couple of times. But then with KY3, I just wanted to become very good at it. And usually if I'm going to take the time to put my name on something, I don't want it to look bad. So I've tried really hard to become a good photographer. And I would have never guessed that would have been something I would have been interested in college. I never picked up a real camera in college, not once. And now I wish I did.
Yeah, same here. Same boat. I've somehow managed to jump into it, and technology has made things a whole lot easier, obviously. Sure. But I mean, I knew my way around Photoshop, but DSLR camera. I would have never guessed that I would have like been interested in buying one and owning one and having 4 lenses and all this stuff.
I know, it's the same here. I would have never guessed it. But I guess that's just how you develop. But I mean, you develop in everything. Like in my writing, I thought I was a good writer coming out of college, and I think I was pretty good. But just the way my editors at the newspaper right out of school would like tear apart my story. And they're these like old, not that old. They were in their mid 60s. This like old Boston, New England couple who's like owned the paper for 40 years. And they're both like really nice isn't the right word. They're like, they want you to do well, but they're not going to hold back in how they do it. And they do and this John was his name, and his like thick Boston accent would just kind of sit down and look at your story with you and be like, I'm not going to do the accent well, but just like, what were you thinking here? Just like, this quote you have in the 5th paragraph, move it up to the top. This is terrible. And he'll just like get in your ear. But every time I write now, I think of him and I think of what he told me. So like I've learned more since college than I did in college as far as writing and photography and social media. Yeah.
So that begs the question to me. I feel, and again, this isn't to, say that college isn't important, but there's something to be said for on-the-job training and real life experiences and what those do for you. You're literally speaking my language with all this stuff that once you get thrown into the fire, you start really hitting home of, wow, okay, this is how this needs to work. I got to sort of modify this. It seems like you've had some of the same experiences that I've had of, okay, that worked for college, but it's not exactly like that.
And, I've had that thought too, like maybe college isn't as important as I made it out to be going in. But I actually think like when I have a kid that's getting ready to go, I'll just kind of go in with different advice for them. And it's not that my parents didn't give me this advice, but maybe they weren't, because they went to school in the 80s, the mid 80s. So they didn't maybe have the same opportunities that I had. So they didn't know about them. But, I went to Ohio. They have 18 Division I sports, great newspaper. And I just chose to go to sports management, but just to write for the paper. And I don't think I tried hard enough to, because Twitter was around then, Facebook was around then, to go to even if I couldn't get in with the football team, go to the volleyball team or this or that and figure out how can I help out running and managing content for you. And I think people in college now take advantage of that a lot more, but maybe not as many as I think do. But if I had, it would have been a different story. So maybe like I say I learned more since college just because I think I learned more with on-the-job training than I did in classes. But I think I could have had more on-the-job training in college if I was pushed in the right direction, which is maybe partly my fault, but maybe partly the school's fault too, because, there's all these kids in these classes, and I don't remember many teachers reaching out to me or saying to us that you have this opportunity or that opportunity with the athletic department.
Right. And I get exactly what you're saying, because I'm one of the people that did not do an internship my senior year or right after college. I just sort of graduated and it's like, all right, time to get a job, and just got a job. And it's like, okay, I'm working on a Mac, I'm doing production artwork, and I'm doing some graphic design and getting started. And you just don't know. Had I done an internship and, been working at an advertising agency and realized what a graphic designer does, is this really what I want to do? You figure all that stuff out. But we all got a different path. We all have a different sort of way we figure that stuff out. So
Exactly.
What's been sort of one of those things that you look back on, time only with the Springfield Cardinals, no need to go back past there, but one of the things you're like, man, if I could modify that would be pretty cool to change? Because I feel like you probably have a little bit more creative liberty, creative freedom to do some things with your position. And I know when I sort of look back when I start out at a job, it's like, man, why did I do that when I first started? That was so dumb. I could have done this. And you figure that out 6 months later, or 3 months later, whatever. You ever have a revelation like that or something like, man, if I would have done this way back then, this would have been so much easier?
Yeah. I've only been through 2 full baseball seasons there. So it's maybe, that might be an easier question for me to answer in a year. Once we get to the 2021 season.
Whenever that is.
Right. Having said that, I mean, there's little things. It's more like, why did I think that looked good moments. Early on, I'm trying to find the right filter for our photos, and they're filters that, they're ones that I would create myself on Photoshop and Lightroom. And I think the one, if you go back, not that I expect you to, but if anyone went back to like our April, May, mid-June 2018, I just go back and look at those photos and that filter, and I was like, what the hell, man? Like, at the time, I was like, this looks great. This is cool. It's unique. I had like this little red tint to it, because I saw the Mariners had like a blue tint to their content. I tried to cardinalify that. And now looking back on it, it looks dumb. It looks so minor league. And I mean that as a bad thing. Like, I don't want our stuff to look minor league. I want it to look like it's the Cardinals in our own way. But I think that's probably the big thing. And yeah. The other one would just be my first year, I did not do a good enough job getting close with the players, and that changed second season. But I think a little bit of that was just nerves.
Yeah, I say that could be expected. Good, first year you're sort of wanting to ease your way into it. I mean,
yeah, and there's such a difference between being a reporter and going into a locker room and knowing the guy you want to talk to, and you see these guys every day, and you think in your mind, or at least I did, I kind of would psych myself up into like, God, they're probably tired of me asking them for stuff, but you just got to do your job.
Yeah. And I bet they sort of figured out that they know it's you. It's not any other reporter. It's, a guy who works for the team kind of thing. So, yeah. I think they figured that out.
It's gone from, that in my first year to now, like Zach Kirtley, like DM me today asking me for photos. So it's gone from having like little to no relationship to like, we talk during coronavirus.
Yeah. So my last quick question for you, I'm curious to know, technology is always a big part of digital media, things like that. We've talked cameras, gear, things like that. What's your favorite piece of gear that you're using on a regular basis that you love outside of the camera now? Since I know photography is becoming your thing, but I'm going to take that out of the picture.
Outside of the camera?
Yeah. Because I'll ask you, I've got a question about the camera, so I'm curious to know what equipment you have. But outside the camera, what's your other favorite gadget or gizmo that you like to use for work-related purposes?
I don't get a lot.
Really?
Yeah. Our video production manager has some pretty good ones.
Okay.
He normally uses those on his own. I'm not quite sure what he uses. But, minor league still doesn't, we don't have a big of a budget for stuff. So the camera that I use, it's honestly, it's my gear. I brought it in. They've asked me, numerous times, you sure you're okay with using this? I'm like, yeah, I want our stuff to look good. But yeah, I really don't have anything. I have my camera. I've got a 70-200. I have a 24-70, and then a 35 millimeter prime lens, and those are my gadgets. So I've got all three, all for different purposes, and I've got a Google Pixel, which does the job nicely for anything I need to do on the cell phone.
And your camera, your body?
It's a Canon 5D Mark III.
Nice. I'm an Nikon guy myself, but that's only because when I bought my 70-200, once I bought that thing, it's a Nikon mount. I'm all in on Nikon at that point. So
yeah, well, that's how it was too. It was like, I know there's the Canon Nikon rivalry, but I bought the Mark III because that's what I used at the Ozone. That's what I learned on. So it's just like, I'm not going to learn something new. This takes some nice photos and does the job. So
same thing. Someone let me borrow a Nikon D5100 camera, and they had the fold out. And that's when I started shooting video. And I'm like, oh, this thing takes pretty good video. And I was like, I wonder how much I can get one of these for myself. And I bought a used one, and I just love the camera, and I've stuck with the Nikon ever since. When I bought that lens, and when it was a pretty penny, it's like, well, I'm all in on Nikon now because I'm not getting rid of this lens. Because the lens, quite honestly, was more expensive than that old camera body that I had at that time.
Yeah,
so,
it is.
Yeah.
Guys, one of the most disappointing things this year, and you never know what might happen, but back in the fall, I was talking to Taka, his last name's tough, Yanagamoto, who's the St. Louis Cardinals photography manager. I talked him into coming up and shooting a few games at Busch when Springfield's on the road, and he was like all for it, and now I don't know if that's going to happen. It's like, I miss our games, but that was something that was, really looking forward to as far as continuing to learn how to be a better photographer.
Yeah, it's always a thing to never stop learning, because if you do, you don't want to get past. Especially, I tell people this all the time. Now that I'm this close to high school students, truly amazed at what they know as a high schooler versus what I knew as a high schooler, because I feel like that scale has just completely shifted, because now these kids can lay out 18-page book in InDesign, and they know how to use Photoshop way better than I did as a college freshman. And I'm just blown away by it. It's kind of like, then I forget technology's changed and technology's made things a little bit easier, but still, not to take any away from them with that, they know how to use it. That's the thing. They know how to take advantage of it.
No, I can only imagine what our job market's going to look like for kids that are in high school and middle school now. It's just the competition. It will be absurd. It's going to be so different.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm completely always amazed at some of the stuff I see on social media with motion graphics and video and graphic design. And that's my thing, is graphic design. I'm like, man, this 18-year-old can do that. And then here I am like, what's going on? But all perspective, all got to keep it in perspective. So, well, I appreciate you taking this time, sir. Let people know how they can sort of connect with you on Twitter, and how they can see some of your fine work with the Springfield Cardinals.
Yeah, so I would definitely recommend and hope you guys follow the Springfield Cardinals first on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. So you guys know how it works. Just type in Springfield Cardinals and click the one with the blue check mark. But if you want to connect with me, it's just at Matt Turer. And that's both Twitter and Instagram. And that last name is Turer, so it's Turner with no N. Complicated stuff.
I like it. This has been fun, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time to connect with me.
Yeah, Derek, thanks. It's been fun either way, but I think it's even more fun during coronavirus when you're connecting with so few people.